Who here has used or read articles in Smashing magazine? Yes! Yay. In that case, you probably, who here went to a Smashing Conf in their life? Smashing Conference. That's not enough people. There's a fantastic conference coming up in Freiburg, which is not very far away from here. You can get there comfortably and environmentally friendly by train in what does it take, like an hour,
Bike.
an hour and a half? What?
By bike.
By bike. No.
Okay.
When is the Freiburg one?
September.
September. So you have to wait a little bit, but it's definitely worth waiting for, I would say. So I can start biking now, and eventually I'll make my way there, maybe, unless I get run over by a car, which is not unrealistic. Anyway, so
Okay.
when did we first meet? Actually, I can't remember that.
Dozens of years ago.
Dozens of years. 1,000 years ago, I accidentally downloaded Vitaly over 56K, and
That's very disappointing.
that's very what?
That's very
What do you mean?
disappointing.
Why?
I don't know.
That was the good times, right? Who remembers the fantastic song of the internet that we got to hear every single time we were connecting?
That was fun.
Yeah, that was good times.
ICQ, anybody remembers ICQ?
Who remembers the ICQ number though?
Oh.
See,
I remember.
A few people do. A few people do. 138, and then I'm done. Like that's it. I'm sorry.
306-44656.
So add him on ICQ.
Yeah, by the way, it's very important because ICQ was redesigned.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been relaunched. The data was bought by a Russian company.
Sounds great.
That's so. Sorry? Yeah, I mean, it was actually bought. So, yeah, and they redesigned, and it's actually very much like WhatsApp. It's very similar. The song is gone.
Oh, that's sad.
Oh, somebody has installed it, mate.
Like someone responded.
Brings back memories. Yeah,
Anyway,
memories.
So yeah, Vitaly is amazing, runs so many things, is traveling the world, and somehow still made it here for the workshop earlier today and for this talk. And we told him what we tell every speaker, like, you have 15 minutes, and then that didn't work. So here we are, but I'm really, really excited to have him here. You're going to talk about a very important topic, and a topic that I think we all need to talk more about, which is privacy. So please give a warm round of applause to our last but not least and fantastic speaker, Vitaly.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, so thank you so much for staying, actually. And so many of you, and I have to be a bit louder, I guess, so you all can hear me. Privacy, huh? Anybody excited about GDPR?
Ooh, yeah.
Six and a half people. Anybody excited about CCPA coming up in California?
Oh yeah, the California thing.
The California, right? Anybody excited about this privacy thing altogether? I guess that's we all feel it's important. I was questioning my life choices this January. Seriously, I was questioning my life choices because I was wondering, is it just me who doesn't really care that much about privacy? It's like, so what if Instagram knows stuff about me, and Facebook knows stuff about me, and Google knows stuff about me? Is it a problem? Or is it something that, so what? I have nothing to hide mentality. This is kind of me in January. And then I decided to do an experiment. That was a really sad experiment. I decided to do an experiment, and I asked myself, what if for a year, and I'm so happy that this year ends, what if for a year, every time somebody is going to send me a link to an app or a service or website or anything, I'm going to go to extremes to read the privacy policy and terms and conditions in its entirety before signing up? What would it mean for me? Can you guess how much time I spend on average reading privacy policies and terms and conditions? A lot, right? So my record is Amazon's one. Luckily, I was already signed up for most Google services, so I didn't have to read them, right? But when I look into Amazon, it took me 8 hours, 42 minutes to read Amazon's privacy and terms and conditions. That's a record. It was a really sad Sunday. Trust me, right? Because you don't do it during the work day, you do it during the weekend. The other thing I decided to do is every time I see these cookie pop-ups anywhere, I'm going to go to extremes to opt out from every single tracker. Not because I'm obsessed with privacy again, and not because I have Tor clients installed and anything of the kind, But I was wondering how much time would it take and how difficult would it be for me and what it actually means. Can you guess how much time I spent on average going to websites? I mean, I spent maybe like 5% of the time going to a website and then maybe 40 seconds on average to opt out from every single tracker. And I tried to understand, yeah?
Does the opt-out usually work? Did you test it?
The opt-out, yeah, it's 50-50, I guess. It's always like, because most of the time scripts are already downloaded and executed and everything before you even give your consent. And then if you look into most solutions, you'll find out that there is this notion of active and passive consent. There's no such thing as passive consent in GDPR. So like by scrolling on this page, by hovering around that button, you agree on the terms and conditions. That's not how it works. This is not really compliant, but that's a different conversation. So I try to understand what it means and where it comes from. Oh, all of a sudden GDPR is here now. Everybody has to do it and put a cookie pop-up in it. Right? So I try to understand what it means. And so I spent a lot of time this year talking to people, trying to see how they see privacy. Is it just something that some people care? Is it something that we all care about? And how far do we care about it? And that brought me to really, really strange things, and which I want to also share with you today. So I'm really happy that this year is over because this was a nightmare. It was horror for me. I have to explain one thing though. I was working with the European Parliament, so like some of the election results pages and some of the internal sites and marketing campaigns we did together. And so once you work there very closely with somebody who is kind of designing or at least trying to push for GDPR, kind of try to understand why it's done and where it's coming from. So please keep it in mind as I keep talking about it. But first we need to kind of look into the state of things. And I was so concerned once you look at the web through the Prince lens of privacy, things are getting messy. How did we end up in a world where this is normal? I remember the times before the web existed. Anybody remembers the times before the web? Yeah, maybe not that many people, but there was no web for a while. That's, I think, very important to state. And when it came up, it wasn't this, it was Flash intros, and they were much nicer, right? Flash intros were much more respectful, right? There was ActionScript, of course, with all kind of crap as well. But, more or less, it was very different. We didn't get that most of the time when you were browsing the web, right? Anybody misses Flash times? Well, not the technology maybe, but, the crazy creativity when you would click on the button and you would not know what happens. That was incredible. That was good times. Like now you click on the button, you know exactly what's going to happen. That's so disappointing, right? And then you end up with this world, and nobody goes on the streets to protest against it, right? We just take it, and it's kind of normal. We just click things away and we proceed, right? But it gets much worse. This is one of the most, weirdest websites I've seen in my life. So this is a website that's going to sell you insect-killing stuff. And I have to show the video of it. If you don't like insects, please close your eyes now. It is not going to be nice, right? But I can almost imagine and feel a designer sitting down in front of Sketch or Photoshop, right, thinking, how can I make it more appealing, right? Let's add a little bit of gray, or maybe a little bit of red, right? I feel blood splatter, right? Let's add that, right? And then make them stop, a nice prominent CTA button. And then let's have a bug on the slider. How cool would that be? And let's have a configurator so you can select your own tool, right? And then you answer a couple of questions. This is how configurators usually go, right? And then boom, here we go. You have your winner. This is the solution for you. Unfortunately, it's only one of the very few options you have on the website, but still configurator. Now, or of course, really, I wouldn't call them bad, but evil companies. Like Ryanair. I remember Ryanair. I'm like an elephant, I never forget. Because for a long period of time, Ryanair, which is redesigned and looks much prettier now, they had this thing, whenever you book a flight with Ryanair, the insurance is added in for you automatically. Well, you can opt out, you just need to know how to opt out, because to opt out, you need to find Don't Insure Me, conveniently located between Denmark and Finland. Right? Now, yeah, I'm wondering. I'm wondering how many people actually, discovered it, right? And then, oh, it did, yeah. So it's like, takes an effort, but this tells us a lot, actually. When you start looking back, this was kind of common, like, 5, 6 years ago. We are so good at finding workarounds. We will not let them take whatever they want. No, we are fighting back. We'll find our way. And we are so good at it. It's unbelievable. We're getting better and better with it every day. And, people who are trying to trick us into things and try to track us, they do the same thing as well. So there is a war going on. And in fact, this war is incredible. Once you start looking, you can never stop. So when this Instagram ad showed up, had incredible engagement. Because nobody wants, it's a hair photoshopped on an ad, by the way, to encourage clicks. And it was working so well. And then people started fighting back and really writing lots of blog posts and tweets about how horrible this company is for doing that, right? Because we learned how to fight back. Of course, we also see companies doing this then and saying, oh, okay, maybe that's a bit too much, Photoshop a hair. So let's just add a little bit of dirt right here, because nobody wants to have dirt on their phone either, right? So it's really going back and forth. And it's getting even better. We all, of course, know and love or maybe hate push notifications, because who doesn't like a good push notification, right? And then we found a way to trick people into giving us access to send them notification. My Meeting, a company that's a blog actually, that informs us about different decisions we could take to improve our health, gives us 2 very clear choices for push notifications. You can choose to stay alive or not, right? Essentially, this is it. Right? And then they ran a test. I'm sure they ran a test because they decided to change this design to something that performed much better, because we like A/B tests, right? We love A/B tests, and if an A/B test works, why not keep it? So they moved from this design to slightly different wording. Please pay attention at the bottom left corner. That's the only thing that's going to change. Wow, isn't that much nicer? Right? And I think that these kind of things are everywhere. But then things are getting messier. And look at that, Beyond Burger, right? Checking your browser before accessing with the reCAPTCHA. I'm not a robot. And then what do you see? Well, please allow to verify that you're not a robot to get notifications. How tricky is that? This is unbelievable. This is just totally out of control, right? And it's not really controlled by anybody. Everybody can just set it up and say, okay, this is not a good practice, but it brings us clicks, right? And very often it's, of course, it's done in a slightly different way. So we see all these little bubbles, red bubbles appearing all over. I've never been to the watch section on Facebook, like ever in my life, but it tells me, something is waiting for you there. Because we don't like to have these red bubbles, don't we? No, we don't. And then you go on many wonderful websites that will tell us that we're just missing out on something. We always miss out on things, unbelievable. So it doesn't matter where you go, somebody just bought that, snapped the last thing here, and maybe the last offer over here. And in fact, some of them, I won't tell the names, will be using some really, really strange techniques to do that. And in fact, fake notifications for WordPress doing exactly that, booking.com style, is one of the most popular plugins for increasing engagement, right? Which is, of course, weird. And then if you look down and you look deeper and you start realizing what is happening there, is it real people who just bought something? You'll find out that there is a script. It's just a script that randomly combines names, products, locations, images, prices to imitate that fact that somebody has just bought something, which is not true at all, right? And this is, again, just something that's happening without us even seeing it. I will talk about GDPR in a moment, but I think it's very important to state one thing, whether we want it or not, that GDPR in some way raised awareness about crap that's happening behind our, without us seeing it. And so people are at least a bit more aware about all the things that are happening. And then, of course, there is something else, because we tend to copy what works for other people, like these push notifications, pop-ups, and a newsletter box overlays, and so on. It has to deal with a simple fact. Because, most of you might have seen it in the past. We're doing kind of the same thing over and over, designing slightly better, improving with A/B testing and so on. And it's not only here on the web that it happens. You look in the fashion industry, it's actually similar as well. As you can see, like most of the brands, some of the brands were redesigned. Can you guess why, by the way? Why would you think that this is a good idea to move all these little like details that you have in your brand towards something that's a bit more neutral, sincere, bold.
Web font.
Sorry?
Web fonts.
Well, no, it's actually in retail as well. You go to the fashion brand, to the store, they change the way they look. Now, the reason for it for them is because they want to be a lifestyle company. They don't want to be seen as something special for luxury or standing for something that they couldn't sell. They want to be seen as something that can be pleasing everybody. And this is something that's very typical. But if you please everybody, you have a problem because some people will stand out or some brands will stand out. In a world where everything looks the same, if you want to stand out, you just need to be a little bit different. Right? So I don't know if I like Cybertruck, to be honest, but I definitely not hate it compared to everything else, right? So it looks a little bit, at least a little bit different, and I like seeing that, oh, this is different. I miss this kind of thing where something is a little bit different, right? Now, where does it bring us? Now, again, if we look into the privacy, and because, again, when I started looking into these privacy reminders and all of that, things I discovered. Well, one of them is, this is strange. The F-Secure is one of the companies that provides some sort of links for Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi. And then they had a Herald clause in the privacy policy. So where you agree to assign the firstborn child to them for the duration of eternity, right? This is nice because they know nobody's reading them. So they can do whatever, they can place whatever you want in the privacy policy. Well, they actually confirmed that they don't want to enforce the clause, but you never know. Anybody uses Amazon? Did you read the privacy policy in terms and conditions of Amazon? That's a fantastic reading material for Friday night. It takes you, again, like approximately 8 hours or so. And I highly encourage you to go and dive in and look at the first section, the second section, and dive right into the point 57.10.4, which is going to take a while, right? I think it's just 57.6, actually. Yes, where you will find a most remarkable ever zombie apocalypse clause, where one of the things that Amazon is also building is Lumberyard engine, game engine. So you as a game developer can build robots and ninjas and zombies. But if at some point you're actually planning to build zombies, real zombies using human flesh and body, they will not be liable for that, right? So, and this is not a joke. So this restriction will not apply in the event of the occurrence of a widespread viral infection transmitted via bites or contact with bodily fluids that causes human corpses to reanimate and seek to consume living human flesh, blood, brain, or nerve tissue, and is likely to result in the fall of organized civilization. That might happen, but Amazon is not liable. Right? That's very nice, right? And anybody is familiar with this one? Face app? Anybody use the Face app? Where you have to, when you can upload a photo, and then it tells you how you will look like when you're older. It was really, really famous for a while. And did you read the privacy policy behind it? Yeah, so this is always a story. So I actually spoke to somebody came up to me after my talk because he was working on Face app. And I was so happy because after my first talk, when I mentioned it, they changed the privacy policy because it's remarkably horrible. So if you look into the things that we're probably agreeing most of the time without even reading, right? We see that we grant FaceApp a perpetual, irrevocable, non-exclusive, royalty-free right to do whatever they want with our photos, and of course with photos of people we're uploading. But it gets much worse because they also can use this data, photo in that case, in any way they like, in their lifetime, in any product that they're going to develop through the lifetime of the company, right? And they also can place a device identifier. They may deliver information to them or third-party partner about how you browse and use the service as well, right? And so meaning essentially they can do with the data whatever they want. I mean, luckily it's just device identifier about the cookie or what you access on the website, on the app, right? But why is it, this is the question that I asked myself in March after 3 months of horror, why is it that all these services show up and they don't have a really great UI? They're okay, I guess. But the privacy policy is always lengthy, and it's extremely complicated, and it's hard to understand. We always go into extremes on the privacy policy to be on a safe side for legal, although the interface is not even worth it sometimes. Now, luckily, there are a couple of services. One of them that really helped me and saved my day many times is terms of services didn't read, right? Which essentially highlights all the different things that all the different services do with your data, so you kind of know what is happening. And it's really important for us as developers as well, because whenever you plug in, let's say, I don't know, a like button, Facebook like button, you really need to know what is actually happening to that data. That's also a GDPR requirement, right? So please go ahead and actually take a look. If you're plugging in some plugins from any of the services, you might want to know what is going to happen with the data, right? But most importantly, it's really important to understand that people started fighting back. We started fighting back, right? And this was a crucial point, which caused a lot of attention. I don't know if it's because of Bitcoin or so, but it was really interesting. Where YouTube was serving advertising scripts with CPU draining cryptocurrency miners for a while. So as you were watching videos, you were also mining crypto for somebody else, which is, of course, kind of nice, I guess, for somebody else, right? And then this is where people started fighting back. And I thought for a while that it's just me who is using a net blocker, maybe Facebook blocker, just to speed up things, to be honest, right? But it seemed like it's actually really becoming a mainstream thing. And as I was interviewing people, this year, I was teaching in Amsterdam, in Ukraine, in Georgia, in Germany, in Austria, and I was really surprised because it's very uncommon to see anybody of the age of 15 to 25 who is not using a net blocker today. This is just not happening. Most of them will know of and will be using a net blocker. And in fact, many browsers actually realize that as well, where this kind of third-party tracking cookies are blocked, and it's happening everywhere. It happens on Firefox, it happens in Safari, it happens in Edge, and it also happens in Chrome, right? So that's interesting because when we again look back at this with ad blockers, we kind of need to look as well into where people are spending their time, right? And how things are in general. And just one thing before I show it. It's also funny because I remember the times when AdBlock Plus was in court. Anybody using AdBlock Plus? Right? And AdBlock Plus was in court because a couple of media companies filed a lawsuit against it to make it illegal, right? And they lost. And so what was happening instead? Instead, they were lobbying tons of sites and scripts like this, where like block ad block, which essentially tries to stop ad blocking on your site, showing up a pop-up like please unblock us or not displaying any content at all. Just 12 hours later, after this appeared, there was an anti-ad block killer, which is essentially an ad blocker, right? And so there is a huge war happening there as well. And so, this is very popular. Ghostery, anybody using Ghostery? Well, Ghostery is also a funny story because Ghostery, being an ad blocker, was also gathering data and selling it to advertisers about what people are blocking, right? Because it's a really good industry. You can make good money out of it, right? So it's kind of really important. I mean, it was 2014. It changed hands, but still some people remember. Some people never forget, just saying. Mozilla was famous of releasing a Facebook container to contain Facebook. I don't see like buttons anywhere anymore because they're always kind of deleted for me. The newcomer of the season, Stop Chat Pop-ups, which essentially blocks pop-ups, chat pop-ups, like, hey, please talk to us, we're here for you, block, right? And then another thing that Firefox has been releasing, or Mozilla has been releasing as well, this is fun. It's called Track This, which opens 100 tabs of pure madness so you can adopt an identity that you probably don't have yet. You can be filthy rich and have a couple of, doomsday prepper. And it opens 100 tabs, and essentially it really totally screws up what Facebook or other companies know about you, right? So you will see very different kind of advertising after this. Yeah.
So don't forget to turn off the ad blocker before you do that.
Oh, yes.
I did it. It took me 1 hour, and I didn't turn off.
Okay. So essentially it really targets trackers to make their life a bit more difficult. But when I actually started looking in more detail into all of this, I was so shocked because this is the state of art today, right? Now, when it comes to user behavior, whenever you see a pop-up modal, block. Whenever you get a push notification prompt, block. Chat window pop-up, block. Feedback pop-up, block. Install app prompt, block. Importing context, no way. We know how it worked in the past with LinkedIn when everybody gets spammed all of a sudden, right? Geolocation permission usually blocked unless you really make it very clear why you need it, right? Cookie pop-up, okay. Just a pop-up, just, cookie thing, not a big deal. Although many people actually, especially in Germany and the DACH region, they would actually just scroll past the pop-up. They would not act on it at all. This has become a very common pattern in privacy-conscious areas and also in Europe, but not in the US, of course. Sorry. Then, whenever you get this little thing saying, oh, please turn off an ad blocker, well, we will never turn off ad blockers willingly. This takes a lot of action. There are 3 strategies that people have adopted, which are widely spread, and just have different level of popularity. First, private window, or incognito window, right? So people just open that page in a private window, incognito window, so whatever happens there, happens there. Anybody does that? Medium. Medium, yeah, the medium experience, okay. Second, reading mode button. You click on the reading mode, you can still read an article most of the time. Who does that? A couple of people, right? Third, extra browser. A separate browser for different things, different activities. Yeah, so this is usually the one that's being used when somebody prompts you, and you really want to read an article, right? And don't you laugh at me?
Sure.
And number 4, and that's the most popular one, just go to another site, right? Seems to be working just fine for many companies. So it's really, really hard to make anybody turn off an ad blocker, right? Access to camera photos usually blocked. Access to the microphone usually blocked as well, unless you really make it very clear why you need it. If you have a conversation with somebody, then you will get a permission, but most of the time not. Video autoplay, well, it can just scroll by. That's not a problem. If you want to have a background video, as we learned, pushing me in the face, that's okay, I can scroll by very quickly. People just scroll, we're wasting their bandwidth, but they will not pay attention to it. Maybe unconsciously, of course, but not regularly. Email input, that's a fun one. Imagine you're at the airport, and at the airport you want to get into Wi-Fi, right? There are 4 options for you to get into Wi-Fi. There is option number 1, Twitter. There's option number 2, Facebook. There's option number 3, Instagram. And there's option number 4, email. Okay? So who is going to use Twitter to sign in? 0%, just for the record. Just for the record. Who is going to use Facebook to sign in? A couple of people, 1, 2, maybe. Who is going to use Instagram for sign in? Instagram is 0% consistently. We're not going to let them in. Instagram is our darling. That's a precious one. No. Instagram is definitely no-go. Twitter maybe, Facebook maybe, Instagram no way. Just not happening, ever. No, never. Email. Now, what kind of email would that be? Yeah, because there are 3 kinds of emails. There is this very, very, very private one, the one that only our families and loved ones and a couple of other people know. That's a very precious one, right? Then there is this one, essentially a trash bin or throwaway email, right? It's filled with all kind of newsletter sign-ups and promotions, campaigns, accounts, anything you want. We usually don't even check it, but it's great to set up that kind of account, right? And then there is one in the middle, and that's essentially some newsletters that people want to track, some newsletters that people want to read and follow, and there will be some business email. Am I correct, more or less? So 3 emails, right? So our best ever chance, if we're lucky, is to get into that second email. First, you can forget about it, unless you're like a friend you're really a friend, right? So most of the time, our wonderful emails the emails that we're asking for will be the emails that I kind of leave here, or just fake, right? And in fact, this is really funny. I would love to see that airport mailing list. I think it would be filled, full with all kind of creative emails, right? My personal email that I use all the time is marcus@gmail.com. It's not mine. Yeah, poor Marcus. There are many accounts being created. So most of the time, email input, we're going to get fake one. And it also goes for other things, like if it's anything that's personal, like gender, age, or phone number, people are really good at not revealing their personal data because they know why it's asked for, right? So it's very common to see people, when it comes to gender, they will specifically extra, by design, set the wrong one, right? The same goes for age. They would set up something like 69, right? And the same goes for phone number, because we know, of course, that when it comes to phone number input, you, developers like yourselves, you probably track the formatting so it's the right format, so it's enough digits. So what do people do? Very common. They will type their phone number, and then they would change the last 2 digits so they cannot be spammed. Anybody does that? A couple of people, right? So this is actually also becoming a very common thing. This is, I think, a very clear sign of our dear customers not really trusting us in any way, right? And then there is, of course, capture. It's not really capture, right? It's crosswalks, right? It's like, let's recognize the crosswalks. Is this pixel over here, is it still a crosswalk? Like this kind of experience. And very often you end up with people still saying, so what? I still have nothing to hide. And after 6 months, in like May or June of this year, I was at the point where I think, this is probably wrong. Because I started looking into some articles, and some of those articles were just creepy. Like this has been one of them. Like the age of menstrual surveillance is upon us. There are a couple of apps, like pregnancy tracking apps, that collect data and generate patterns, and then sell particular information to the highest bidder. So your manager, based on your behavior, by using a slightly different interface in the app, right, can maybe track and predict if you are pregnant or not, or if you're planning a family or not. Right? This is just creepy. And it's been in the news for quite some time. And it's not even that, just one example. You'll find health insurance being very interested about what do you eat, when do you eat, how often do you go to gym, how much money do you spend on your credit card on pizza, and all those things. Right? And in fact, there are all these data brokers, I'm just going to show a couple, Axiom being one of them, that can predict us and our behavior and our future behavior with an incredible precision, right? Just by Facebook likes, like we saw with Cambridge Analytica, we can predict emotional stability, extroversion, openness, and other things with a kind of high level of confidence, right? So many of those things know much more about ourselves than we do. For example, Axiom provides for up to 3,000 attributes and scores on 700 million people. That's a lot of data. You look into Oracle, it sorts people into thousands of categories and provides over 30,000 attributes on 2 billion consumer profiles, right? So they know much more about us than we do, of course, or our parents, or our friends, and everybody else combined, right? And I asked myself, how come that all these services, like Facebook and Instagram and others, there is no premium version where I could say, like, I'm going to pay $5 or so, and no tracking, no advertising. I don't even care about advertising that much, but tracking is something I feel uncomfortable with, right? There is no such thing, because obviously our data is much more valuable. It's probably much more valuable than anything else. And then when you start going deeper, it's incredible. So this is one of the services where they bought data from a data broker about pregnant ladies, and they were sending envelopes with postcards congratulating them and also inviting them to the product. That's creepy, right? Have you ever had this experience where you're talking to somebody, maybe even now, and then all of a sudden that thing that you spoke about with a friend shows up in Instagram and in WhatsApp and maybe in other places? Anybody had this experience? Right? Well, frankly, I don't know, there's been a couple of articles tracking this, right? Where they were speaking certain things to a phone, right? And there are specific trigger words that you might want to use to trigger, to test it, like buying Alexa or something, right? And so it might be, I wouldn't be surprised if I actually showed up next week. It seems like there are signals that are being sent to servers. And in fact, according to this article, overall it counted over 1,000 triggers for Facebook alone that get activated periodically. And there are audio segments being sent. So if, for example, you don't talk to somebody on Facebook by calling them, it might be a good idea to turn off audio access to microphone for them, right? Although they might still be listening, you never know. And then there is this thing that showed up. I don't think we have a microphone, but I'm just going to play it just to see. The thing I'm going to see next is real. You can use this service today, and it's perfectly legal.
The Spinner is a new online service that enables one to control articles presented to a pre-chosen specific individual on the websites he or she usually visits in order to subconsciously seed a message in their minds. That person, the target, is exposed to hundreds of items strategically placed as editorial content, repeating the same message over and over and over again. Whether it is propose marriage, quit smoking, initiate sex, or stop riding motorcycles. How does it work? The basic package offers a set of 10 different articles presented to the target 180 times over a 3-month period. The articles, along with their eye-catching headlines, are chosen by a group of psychologists in order to influence the target on a subconscious level. The Spinner sends you an innocent-looking link. The link is sent to the target via text message. When the target presses the link, a cookie connected to the link attaches itself to the target's phone. From this point, the target will be strategically bombarded specified for him or her. The story of The Spinner was covered by Rolling Stone, Financial Times, New York Post, The Sun, and many others. Alongside popular preset campaigns, The Spinner also offers tailor-made campaigns. The most requested tailor-made campaign is Settle Outside of Court, which has now been added as a preset campaign, and Get Back with Your Ex. If you're interested in a campaign tailor-made for your specific messages and goals, go to www.spinner.net.
This is just unbelievable, right?
For which year?
Sorry?
From when is this?
From this year, right? Now the weirdest thing about it is, I tried to buy it, right? So here, because I thought, because I thought it cannot be, no way, this cannot be real, right? So I went through the checkout and I paid and I then canceled, and I don't know if it's actually a scam or not. I got my money back, to be honest. So because it wasn't working for me, right? But it's really strange because it actually costs just $49 for a campaign like this. It's like democratization of conscious impact as service, right? I guess, which is incredible. Sorry? Yeah, this is just really, really weird. And then if you look into the FAQ and the terms and conditions and stuff, I ask myself, is it legal? And they say, sure, of course it is. Is it legal? Yes, in today's vast online media market, the attachment of cookies is legal, right? And so this brings us to the point of GDPR, huh? So maybe it should not be legal. That's kind of my point, really. And so when we start looking now in a bit deeper, I think one of these really important conversations that is missing is not about people who are obsessed with privacy, obsessed with tracking, who are just really looking into all and just not to share too much about their identity. It's like many things that people just should share, I guess. So if you're looking for a new job, maybe you don't want your manager to find out about it from somebody else before you found the job, right? Or maybe when you're trying to propose to somebody or thinking about it and you're looking for jewelry, probably that person should find out about it from Instagram ads. Just saying, all those things are kind of day-to-day battles that I think we should be more aware of. And I guess that in many ways, this thing that came up then as a result, GDPR came into force on 25th of May 2018. It's also a fantastic reading material Friday night, but it doesn't come out of nowhere, right? This is coming from Directive 9546/EC from 1995, which is essentially all about protecting personal data. And again, this is a very long material to read, but there are a couple of things that are important. And I think that it's really that difficult. So first of all, data is everything. It's any online identifier, not only your cookies, because GDPR in many ways is seen as a cookie thing. No, it's everything. IP addresses, mobile device IDs, browser fingerprints, telemetry, MAC addresses, and other things, right? And one thing that is kind of based upon is this notion of privacy by design, which essentially means privacy is a default behavior. You don't have to opt in for privacy. Privacy is given to you by default, right? And it's coming from Dr. Ann Cawlkian from 1990, which is a very big foundation of GDPR. And so privacy efforts have to be proactive, not reactive. It's just given by default. And so it has a couple of features which are important, right? Whenever you require only core functionality for the site to work, you don't even have to ask for permission. You might want to, or might need to inform the customer, but you don't have to get their explicit permission as long as you just need certain things like cookies, again, for core functionality. You have to define what it means. But no unnecessary data may be collected by default, and unnecessary data may be collected with users' consent. So we always have to ask for permissions first. And a couple of other things. The users can revoke or edit consent. They can download, delete the data. They have the right to be forgotten, right? This is essentially everything that we need to know about GDPR most of the time, right? And I asked myself, so does it work? Is it actually a good thing? Or is it just, didn't really work? Now, it didn't really work. So when we look into things that are happening on the web today, this is a very common pattern that you will see in most cases. Just people being kind of tricked into giving consent, right? And so on New York Times, well, you can review your settings. There are a couple of options. You can click on the close button. You can click on the I accept button, or you can just scroll by and it's going to collapse, and it's all considered as silent consent, right? So wait, hold on. There are no options, right? So it doesn't matter what you do, it's still consent. Well, there is no such thing as a silent consent. It has to be explicit, right? When you start looking and you start going through the sites trying to opt out, wow, we've come up with patterns that I would never think I will see in my life, right? Here on this particular site on @age, not very surprising, @age, it takes approximately 3.5 minutes to opt out from everything. And then if you do, even if you do, because there is also a way to do that, and you decide to save your settings, as you will see in a second, that's a lot of stuff that's being shared, right? It's like the processing. We need to have a processing in place for cookie settings, right? It's not just save and done. For some reason, like clicking on the button when you want to check out is fast, but then saving the cookie settings, it takes time. You just wait, right? So it's wait. And then you start kind of going deeper and you'll find out that very often you end up with these kind of experiences, right? Well, obviously you can check the vendors on the site, and then some of them are opted in, some of them are not, right? And then you go and you're like, check, because there is no way to unselect all of them. You have to manually do each of them. So no wonder it takes me like 40 seconds or so on average, all right? It's very sad. And then, of course, you end up with things like this in the US. Los Angeles Times, oh, sorry, no Europe. No Europe. I don't know if you get to see this, because normally most of the scripts don't include Switzerland as part of European Union. So do you see these cookie pop-ups? Right? I was really surprised, because some of them, just whenever something is not North America, Europe works. So you see like cookie pop-ups showing up in Australia of all places. I'm like, Australia? I don't think there is a law for that, right? Then you also see this thing showing up. Premium EU subscription, right? Free for everybody, but the European Union has to pay. Or kind of accept cookies, right? And then there are a couple of really interesting things, because, for example, for a while in Netherlands, where I was kind of teaching for a while, this thing showed up, where this cookie overlay thing, you have to accept it in order to continue to the site. And then there was a rule, precedent in Netherlands, where this has become illegal, so you can't just block the site, apparently, right? So many of the websites stopped doing that, and then this thing showed up from our wonderful good old friend, SBB. Isn't that nice? Cookie settings. There is necessary cookies, which are opted in by default, which is fair, and this is how it should be. And then statistics, comfort, and personalization are not opted in, which is also fair, and also GDPR compliant. But let's take a closer look at the red button. Well, you have two obvious choices, right? You can select all and confirm, right? Or you can confirm your selection. And then some other sites were inspired by this magnificent pattern, and so you see these things coming up. Necessary is a default, but then you can allow all cookies, right? Or manage your cookie settings, right? So can we do it a bit better? Before we talk about the purpose of GDPR, well, yeah, the one thing is, if you be a bit more honest, you will have two choices. Not that it's hard, it's just nobody wants to do it because you want the data, right? And so then we kind of select, when we want to adjust cookie settings, you select what kind of cookies we want to accept. By default, only functional are allowed, and then you kind of move on. You can make it a bit more funny, right? Where you have this little root thing and terminal thing on JetBrains. You type yes for agreeing and no for not agreeing, right? And then you also see this thing kind of showing up quite a lot, where you can show details, and you have a little bit of accordion in a way, or tabs, sorry. And by default, the preferences, statistics, and so on should not be selected. So it's not like we can't do it. We just don't want to do it because we also want the data, right? Now, one of the interesting things is if you want to get consent, you kind of have to explain why you need it. So this is one of the examples where it kind of worked fairly well, where you have this slider, and then you explain, well, I need functional cookies for this. This is the functionality you're getting as a result, right? Advertising cookies and other things. So you kind of get at least some sense of what is going to happen when you select one of the settings, right? I mean, it's still a big debate. So what if, if let's say New York Times is not GDPR compliant? It's not like it's not like European Parliament or European Union is going to go against New York Times. And where is the place or where this law court will take place? That's very confusing. So right now there is not even a single case where a company that wasn't respecting GDPR in terms of cookie pop-up, right, had to pay anything. But Google had to pay something, and Marriott had to pay something, mostly for data breaches and insecure storing of data, right? So this is a slightly different thing, because in the end, GDPR is trying to protect the data, or at least give us some control about how data is collected, how much data is collected, and what's going to happen to it, right? And there are some really simple, again, patterns we could use, right? Now I have good and bad news for you. Which ones do you want first? Bad. Let's start with the good ones. Yeah, again. So first of all, when GDPR came out, there was a huge boost of companies saying, hold on, that particular site has Google Analytics, we have to block it, we have to pay a fine, right? And it never got anywhere because it's not clear. Is actually Google Analytics, any kind of analytics actually, a core functionality or not? It's kind of important, obviously, for publishers, for example, but there was a huge number of complaints which never got anywhere, right? Then CookieBot published this article, which I found, on Plain 49 case, that the only form, which is just recently, it's October this year, the only form of valid consent for processing user data in the European Union is explicit consent. So there is no such thing as a passive consent. So, for example, consent that is actively and specifically given by the website users by ticking a box, which has to be an active action, right? An action from the user side. And so this has been regulated by the Justice of the European Union. So if you want to be GDPR compliant, it cannot be already pre-filled. You cannot trick people into committing. So does it work? Well, it's difficult to say because there was a study in Germany, again, studying GDPR consent notices in the field, and I was so shocked when I saw the results. These are the results in Germany, again. No action is a very common thing. It's actually really a very, very common thing, especially in older generation. It's very unlikely that people will provide consent easily. At the same time, if you want to get, there are different things you could do potentially, but one of the things you could do if you want to get as much acceptance as possible is to put it, I think, in the right bottom corner and also call it cookies, like something with cookies. Instead of privacy settings, just cookies, right? And what's really interesting about this, that again, most people avoid making a choice, right? And if they have to explicitly enable them, the majority won't do it, which is really bad news for marketing and pretty bad news for advertising as well, right? So this is something that we kind of have to watch out for. Really? Sad. Okay. So what does it mean for us? Well, first of all, it means that there are a couple of things. First, it's just a start because, again, CCPA is coming on January 1st, which affects mostly mid-size and large companies, right? But it's kind of GDPR light in the US. There are very strange conversations happening in the US right now. I was approached by somebody at a table in the US, and they were telling me and asking me, so why is the developers think that they're very special? I'm like, not special, feel very normal, not special. And they're like, what do you mean? Well, special in a way like, well, if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or any kind of responsible adult profession, right? You go and you study and you pass your exams and you get your license or certification, anything of the kind, and then you are a doctor or a lawyer or a baker or electrician or anything. But developers, they almost don't need anything. I can wake up one day and say, I'm going to watch a couple of Wes Boss tutorials today, right? And I'm just going to become a React developer today. And everybody can do that. So the question was, shouldn't all developers and designers, because we have so much power, be liable or at least get the certification before they can practice development and design? I'm like, I don't know. That's a difficult question to ask. But one way or the other, these conversations are happening. And just the one final thing I want to leave you with, I promise, is that this is the good news. It seems like the cookie pop-up is going to fade away. Because there is this little thing, document from 2017. There has been a hearing this November. They didn't get far, but they're still working on it, which is kind of not a replacement, but the second part of the new legislation coming in from European Union, from us to you. No, just kidding. The first one was GDPR, right? But the second one is the e-privacy directive. And e-privacy directive is actually kind of refining some of the things that are GDPR is, where GDPR is very broad of. One of them is, for example, analytics. Is it necessary or is it optional? Really, just 2 minutes. Yeah. Right? I'm really finished. I really promise, almost. It's just, yeah, just.
I don't even have to say anything.
No, yeah, I heard. I'm going to be. I'm just going to be there just in a second. So one thing that's important. No, but it's really important because GDPR was one part of the story. The second part of the story is this directive, which is coming next year. And in that directive, one thing that is written is the consent rule to protect the confidentiality failed to reach its objective as end users face requests to accept tracking. So the European Union has understood that it doesn't work, right? And there are a couple of options. One of the preferred options is option number 3, which is measured reinforcement of privacy and simplification. And as it says here, just read. So one of the things that they're proposing. Nice. You're making me uncomfortable, isn't it?
It's my job.
I know. Yeah, just come. Just.
Go.
Yeah. So.
It's just 349 slides. We're at 153.
Yes, but I'll be jumping. What can I tell you? Yeah, but I'm really just finishing this point. So one thing that's really important to notice is that what they're proposing is to include the privacy notion in the browser settings, in Chrome and in Firefox and so on. So once you get a new version of a browser, this is what they want to enforce actually. They don't even talk to browser makers, it's just happening behind the scenes. Although I wish there was a talking actually. That it should be a do not track settings defined in a browser. So every time you update it, you're supposed to get an option to select what you want to share and what not. Right? Obviously, it's much more efficient than, let's say, cookie pop-up. And then finally, this is the important part, which is the simpler rule on cookies. No, this is important because actually analytics and core functionality are becoming a default. So if you're using Google Analytics, that's fine. You don't have to ask for permission for it. So if you want to read this, which is a fantastic reading material as well, nobody wants to read it?
I will eventually probably read it. Okay, where are we going with
I'm
this?
going to the end. That was quick, right?
Yeah, that was amazing. You basically
I can go up as well.
missed past the deadline, but sure.
Okay. Yeah,
no,
okay.
it's cool. No, it's good. Yeah.
To jump to the end.
You do the thing.
Okay.
You can show the video, the last one, if you want.
I've shown it.
Okay. Ooh, okay, fine.
Yeah, okay.
That's a kind of nice one.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, maybe I'll show it. That's okay.
No, why does this say wrapping up? It wasn't like the last.
Oh, I haven't finished yet. No. So I think one interesting thing. Yeah, but I think one interesting thing is that whenever we look into all of this, privacy might seem like a very boring thing. I'm just gonna. Yeah, let's just finish up. It might seem like a very boring thing, right? But I think that we are living in this moment right now, when the next year it might seem like there is going to be a lot of changes coming up in privacy. It might be one of the most important things that we'll see on the web, because we might clean things up a little, which I think is good. Right? We'll see how it's going to play out. But if this cookie pop-up disappears and we have a pretty much clear thing in terms of tracking, and we actually get some information about the analytics, then we're in a good place. With this in mind, I think I will be showing that video on demand.
Yeah.
right? And this is kind of the story of my life, and I always show it because the life isn't satisfying and the world isn't satisfying. We can always try to make it a little bit better. So this is the story of our lives in 2019 and 20. Oh. Well, huge thanks to Parallel Studio. I hope that they're going to release the second edition, second season of it. That'll be fun. With this in mind, the only thing I have is cats, and now let's make the web a little bit cleaner. We deserve it. So thank you.
So much.